We're really proud to have with us Miss Penny Hartin. Penny is the Chief Executive Officer of the World Blind Union, which represents the views and needs of 285 million visually disabled persons at the global level. Prior to joining the WBU in 2006, Penny spent over 25 years in senior management roles with the CNIB, the major provider of rehabilitation services for blind persons in Canada. At the international level, she served for 6 years on the first United Nations panel of experts to monitor the standard rules on disability, worked on the United Nations development and implementation work, and frequently represents the WBU internationally. Penny has a low vision, uses speech and screen magnification, access technology, and a guide dog, Chicory, which is lying underneath, a wonderful dog at the, that you will be pleased to introduce to you eventually. So Penny, the theme of her presentation is Have Dog Will Traveling with a Guide Dog. So Penny, we're really proud to have you with us today.
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much, Renee. And Chicory, you've probably seen Chicory wandering around. She's the cute yellow Labrador retriever that, and she has to carry her own backpack. I said, why should I carry your bags for you? But we're both very pleased to be with you this morning to share with you our perspectives and experiences as a human guide dog team. We also hope to provide you with information and suggestions about how to welcome persons with disabilities traveling with guide and other service dogs to your premises, facilities, or services. And just so you know, you can rest your eyes. There's no PowerPoint. My role as Chief Executive Officer of the World Blind Union requires me to travel extensively at the international level. I live in Toronto, Canada, and also try to avail myself of the services and programs available in that very busy and growing city. I almost always travel with outsider assistance, except for the sight of my trusty guide dog, Chicory, of course. She's now my second guide dog, trained at Guide Dogs for the Blind in California, United States. And I've been using a guide dog for about 10 years now. During this time, I and my guide dog have been at least on 100 flights with the dog, particularly with North America and Europe. We have traveled on all sizes of aircraft, trains, trams, ferries, buses, subways, commuter trains, and of course taxis when they'll let us in. And we have visited cities from large to small, from old infrastructure to more modern infrastructure, and have therefore dealt with really a wide range of travel and service situations. Traveling with a guide dog requires a lot of advanced planning, as it does for anyone traveling with a disability, of course. And there can certainly be some unforeseen challenges that one must deal with upon arrival. Probably the most notable one for me was being stranded in Vienna during the volcanic ash storm of 2010, and not knowing when we would be able to return home, and worrying about where I was going to get more food for my dog at the time, Oleana, because definitely her food was going to be running out before our stay did. But despite these challenges, traveling with a guide dog brings with it a lot of benefits and rewards. Things like there really are good company. They enhance one's safety and security, particularly as a woman with a disability traveling in a large city. I definitely feel more secure with a guide dog. They're excellent at remembering routes. For example, she definitely knows her way to the convention center. She knows where the washrooms are. She knows where the elevators are in the hotel. She knows where her relief area is. And we only arrived yesterday at noon. So she'll even know, where I might be sitting in a conference room. If I go out to the washroom, she'll remember where we've been sitting. And she's even been known to find our friends in the bar at the hotel. So I don't always take my guide dog with me when I travel, however. I established very on some very simple rules that have been very helpful to me in deciding whether or not it's wise or safe to take the guide dog. The first one is, if I can't drink the water from the tap, she doesn't get to go, because my feeling is that she can pick up any waterborne diseases that I can, and she would probably be even more vulnerable than I would. And also, another rule is that if I would need an armed bodyguard to go out with us when I have to take her out to the bathroom late at night, then she doesn't get to go either. There are some other considerations, too, that I take into consideration. One is if the travel is really complex. A recent trip that I had, for example, I was going to both Japan and Australia, with the airline routing taking me from to Singapore, to China, and Thailand during the journey. And while I could technically have taken the guide dog with me, each country had their own rules and regulations for quarantine and medical certificates and all those sorts of things. And the trip was also going to be very long, so I just felt it was better for her to stay home. There can be some complex cultural issues that we often have to deal with as well. There's some cultures and religions do not readily accept service animals, or dogs are primarily used as guard or attack dogs within a country. And you have to be really careful if there's stray dogs that are running in the streets, because they can impose significant dangers to guide dogs. And sometimes it simply won't be away long enough to warrant the withdrawal of food and water that would be required if the journey is longer than, let's say, 14 or 15 hours. To me, my dog's welfare must come first. I'm the one deciding to travel, not her. So I really have to make sure that I take the proper decision when I decide to take her with me, because I really have to be responsible for her care, comfort, and well-being. So I found that these simple guidelines that I've shared with you, as well as a healthy sense of good dose of common sense, really will help one make the right decision. Now, well, my experience has been with guide dogs especially trained to assist persons who are blind, and these are likely the most well-known service animals, having been in use the longest for close to 100 years now. There are now other types of service dogs that are being used as well. Because of the successful partnership that has been demonstrated over the years between blind persons and guide dogs, the benefits of using service dogs to assist persons with other disabilities were identified, and training programs have emerged over a number of years now to train dogs for different purposes. So some examples would include hearing ear dogs, who would let a deaf person know if their telephone was ringing, if someone was at the door, if the fire alarm was going off, for example. For persons using mobility devices, where they might carry objects for one, they might press the door opening devices or elevator buttons, retrieve objects from the refrigerators. Epilepsy dogs who can detect if somebody's having a seizure. Dogs are very frequently now used for those suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. So it is important to understand that service dogs are trained for a specific purpose, and to qualify as a true service dog, they really need to be trained by a recognized and certified training institution or individual. I do know that there is a movement in some places for individually trained dogs, for people to train their own dogs. I don't subscribe to that. I think that dogs need to be properly trained and certified. I know there will be those who disagree with me. When I say that service dogs are trained to perform specific functions, let me give you some examples with respect to what guide dogs do for blind or partially sighted people. They're trained to walk around obstacles, to stop at curbs, stairs, or other points where there's a significant variation in terrain, to find objects such as chairs, maybe doorways, where the elevators are. Dogs are colorblind. They do not know when the lights have turned red or green. The owner must always know what the traffic patterns are telling them, and that they must make the decision when it's safe to travel. But on the other hand, at least guide dogs for blind people, are trained in what's called intelligent disobedience. So if I tell her to cross the street, she knows a car barreling down towards us, she won't go. So, and that's, and she's trained not to go. Service dogs also have very different identifiers depending on what their purpose and the institution that they train from. Guide dogs for blind persons generally have a very easily identifiable harness. It's actually that harness handle that's used for guiding. Other service dogs might have other types of harnesses. They might wear scarves or vests. But I believe all service dogs should have some sort of identifier so that they can be differentiated by the government, by the public, by service providers, the hotels, airlines, and so on. And most service dog users will also carry some sort of identification. And it's quite appropriate for service providers to ask to see that identification, as unfortunately there are instances happening more and more frequently now when people will try to pass off their pets as service animals. So I think it's up to us, as those who have legitimate service animals, to encourage service providers to ask for the identification to make sure the legitimate service animals are granted entry. So that's basically some background about what service dogs are, what they do, and how and why they're used. For a service provider, there are many things that can be done to make your services and more comfortable and accessible for people who are using service dogs. Among those, I would say the awareness raising and staff training are among the most critically important. Staff members need to understand what some of the rules and regulations are in terms of access, that in most parts of the world, service dogs are allowed into public spaces. And they need to know the basic techniques of how to assist someone who's accompanied by a service dog. Most people nowadays do know that it's inappropriate to pet or talk to a service dog. They're working, and sometimes if the dog is distracted, it can throw them off what they're doing as a guide, and it can be downright dangerous. I've had times when I'm actually crossing a street and someone will reach over and start to pet the dog. That's very dangerous, and those of us who experience that can get a little bit grumpy. However, on the other hand, many of us are very willing to let you pet our dogs. If they're at rest, in fact, not actually working, and if you ask us first. And then we're often happy to, and particularly when children are involved, because it gives us an opportunity to explain the purpose of the dog, what they're used for, and so on. In the case of a guide dog and other service dogs, the request and the address always needs to be made to the owner. You don't talk to the dog directly and say, hey, Chicory, over here. You say, Penny, let's go to your, let's turn to your right. And you'd never, ever, ever, ever try to feed a working dog. Most countries in North America, South America, Europe, and many Asian and Pacific countries have laws or regulations permitting access to all premises where the public is allowed. That means access to hotels, transportation, restaurants, stores, taxis, cultural centers, recreation programs, parks, so on and so forth. A couple of exceptions. A zoo, probably not, because of the danger imposed. And we understand that. We want to keep our dogs safe, too. This access must be provided at no extra cost to the handler. For example, it is not acceptable for hotels to consider service dogs as pets and try to impose a pet surcharge, and that does still happen. It happens all the time. They are not pets. It is also a requirement that the service animal would stay with the person who has a disability. So in an airline, they don't go down into the hold. They stay in the cabin with the individual traveling. The same would go on train, on accommodations, restaurants, and so forth. And so if seating is restricted, then it is expected that some additional space be provided, whether that's on an airline. Sometimes the bulkheads might be sufficient. Sometimes it's important to provide an extra seat. ICAO does have guidelines around ensuring that if the dog is a certain size, that there should be extra space. And it is based on size. Some service dogs are quite small and can fit quite easily underneath a seat. But I don't know if those of you have seen Chicory, she's a Labrador Retriever, so they're by nature pretty long, and she's about 55 pounds, so it would be about 26 kilograms. She's just too big to fit under an airline seat, particularly on those regional jets. It's just not going to happen. And guide dogs for blind people have to be larger in order to handle the physical work of guiding a blind person. Because if I'm crossing a street, I'll give you an example, and she needs to disobey me, and I'm walking across the street, and a car comes barreling towards me, she has to be strong enough to push me out of the way. So you're not going to find that with, a Bichon Frise. They're not going to be big enough, or a Chihuahua. So the dogs have to be physically strong enough and big enough, obviously, to be able to handle that. 2 minutes? Okay, thanks. All right. So I've talked about the extra space on airlines and so on that's required. In terms of hotels and so on, oftentimes assistance might be requested in terms of where's there a proper relief area, and where can I take my dog? On cruise lines, lots of people do travel on cruises these days, and most of the larger cruise lines do provide a relief area on the deck, and that works quite well for people. There are issues, however, with getting into some of the islands, because the regulations, they vary for every single island. So you go into the Caribbean, you might be able to take your dog into one place, but not into another. So those are things that we have to be working on overall. Taxis is a huge issue. Many taxis will drive by a person who has a guide dog. I went to Geneva, my worst trip, went to Geneva for meetings at the United Nations. 7 taxis in a row refused to take me with my guide dog. It was only when I went inside the airport and requested assistance from the information desk, they sent out some police with me, and then I was able to get a guide dog. But in the seat of the International Council for Human Rights, that's not very good. So now, it's expected that dogs are well groomed, that people look after their own dogs, but it is reasonable for them to ask for some assistance. I'm just going to scroll through to my conclusions here. And because I know my time is running out, there are, of course, many aspects of working with a service dog, so I've only covered some of them, the highlights in the time that I've had this morning, but I hope they have been helpful to you. It has been said by many that a dog is man's best friend. That statement has never been so true as for those dogs who willingly walk by our sides, protecting us from danger and opening doors both literally and figuratively. They truly have become our best friends. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hartin. We'll take a few questions. If yes, we have one right here, going with the microphone.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am from Barbados, and only last week we had a visit from our first guide dog out of the UK, because we've recently amended our animal import law, which allows animals to come from many different destinations. Being a rabies-free territory, we couldn't allow animals in outside, even though we know guide dogs would not have rabies. It was still a very major concern for us. But the reason I wanted to address this issue now is because one of the areas that is presenting itself are the issue of emotional support animals. Apparently, on some airlines, it is, if you travel with an emotional support animal, you are allowed a different airfare, a lower airfare. And what we're seeing is a lot of people from other islands where they have offshore universities. A lot of students are traveling with small dogs, claiming them as emotional support animals, having certificates printed off of the internet. And because they get the concessions on air travel. And so now that we're beginning to implement regulations to allow in animals, we're trying to figure out what are some of the considerations we need to put in place to protect ourselves against these kinds of things. Because if you have that, you know, if you have an animal that is properly certified, you know that that is coming from a reputable agency, you know that it's disease-free. But if it's just someone who picks up a pet or picks up a random animal to get a concession, you don't have those guarantees. And so I wanted you to address, Penny, for me, how would you advise us to go when we are putting together our regulations to ensure that we do get good quality service animals coming in and to protect our borders from these challenges? Thank you.
Carrie Ann, that's a really important issue, and I know it's one that a number of guide dog associations, guide dog users associations from many countries deal with, and other assistance dogs too, because, yeah, you can print stuff off the internet now. So it makes it really, really difficult for the legitimate service dog users. I know the policy that Air Canada uses around this issue is that they require a doctor's letter from the original doctor's letter for the therapy dogs, just so that they can help get around that. And I think that's reasonable. They don't ask me for one. They know that I'm going to have the card for my guide dog from the legitimate school. So if they're recognized service dogs from legitimate institutions, they accept that certification. But a therapy dog, no, they're not. They're asking for a medical doctor's verification, and so that might be something you want to consider, because personally I think that's reasonable.
Just clarify, when you say the medical doctor, are you talking about the vet for the dog, or are you talking about the doctor that's certified you needed therapy in the first place?
Right, the person's doctor, not the dog's doctor. Yeah.
Yes, we'll take a last question.
I just want to comment that those letters can now also be purchased on the
Wow, it's it's an issue. It really is an issue, and I'm not sure how it's ultimately going to be resolved. Because it creates a huge problem for those of us who travel with legitimate service dogs, for people to behave in that way.
Hi, it's Paul Levin from National Research Council Canada. I have a question regarding people with allergies. Have you ever ran into situations on the aircraft, bus, or whatever transportation where you have an individual on board the aircraft or wherever transportation that is allergic to animal dander? Have you run into the circumstances, and so what accommodations did the travel agency or the individual do to help you separate you and your guide dog from someone that might have an allergy?
Well, there are two things. One is for anyone traveling with a service animal, they need to inform the airline well in advance. Also, if someone has a severe allergy, they also need to inform the airline well in advance. And so then the airline can make accommodation. If the plane itself is small, most of the planes now that have a certain capacity and also a certain type of ventilation system can handle both dogs and persons with allergies. It has happened to me that when I've been on the plane with my dog, that the flight attendants have told me that there has been somebody with a severe allergy located on the opposite side of the plane, and then if I can take care not to go to that area of the plane with my dog. And of course, that's easy for me to accommodate. I would have no reason to go there. So generally, it's a matter of information and cooperation, and that can usually solve the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this will be the last question in the back.
Are you aware of any other animal that's used as a service animal? For example, I think a few years ago, in the newspapers in the U.S. reported a pig on a flight to escape from
Oh dear.
Yes, they did.
And the issue of emotional support, I read was used as emotional support. So you know of any other?
Yeah, I'm also aware of a horse, a small horse that was trained, like a miniature horse actually it was for a young woman who was Muslim and who, because of the culture, wasn't able to touch a dog. I don't know if the person flew with the dog, because one of the issues would be how do you physically accommodate the dog? But once again, if the animal is certified and trained from an institution and not just, I trained my pet pig, then I guess they'd have to be accepted. But once it does come down to, you have to be able to control your dog's or your animal's bodily functions so that they don't have to go to the bathroom while they're on a flight. And with dogs, you can do that by controlling what they drink and eat prior to. I don't know with other animals, but you know what? It could become more and more of an issue as people want more personal choice. But I'm not sure that there are very many service dog training institutions that train other animals. So that I think if they stick to animals that are certifiably trained at recognized and accredited institutions, that could help the situation.
Okay, I would like to say a very warm thanks to our four speakers this morning, Mr. Cardinelli, Kiji or Mr. Kijima, Mr. Stigman, and Ms. Hartin. I think it's been really valuable, and we'd like to have another round of applause, please, for our speaker. Thank you. And now I think it's lunchtime, isn't it? Okay, thank you for your interest and great questions.